It's an honor and pleasure to be here, and I'd like to dedicate my first keynote address to the 10th anniversary of the conferences and the 20th anniversary of the Institute. And I'm wearing yellow to honor the sunshine that Lillian and Paul Wong has brought to us by doing all this. So I'll be kicking off talking about the search for existential meaning. And you've already seen where I work, but that's a picture of our building in London, in West Hampstead. And we offer lots of online courses if you want to do a master's program with us. Just a little plug. If you want to look at our website, there they are. I'll be posting these pictures up, by the way, on slideshare.net, so you can find all this out later. These are the 16 books that I've published to date, and very shortly, hopefully within the year, the 17th, which is the magnum opus on the Widening World Handbook for Existential Therapy, should be published. Hopefully before the Second World Congress for Existential Therapy in Argentina. So what I'll be talking about today is how we all try to find meaning in our lives despite adversity. And as you probably know, Nietzsche came to the conclusion that it wasn't despite adversity that we find meaning, but in fact, because of our adversity. Because we learn absolutely nothing at all unless we have experiences and unless things go wrong and we learn by trial and error. And it is the deeper we can go with those difficulties and the feelings they provoke, the more we expand our capacity for creating meaning. That is pretty much, in a nutshell, what I hope to demonstrate this morning. So there's the fire of life, and really it is like a fire, and we can either bring it down and try to minimize it, or we can allow it to grow and to do something with that fire, rather than destroy things, create things, or indeed throw light with it, elucidate our existence. So, making sense of meaning is not a simple matter. One of the reasons for that is that there are so many different ways in which we can make meaning and do make meaning. And we all have different definitions of what meaning actually means. And all of them are true, all of them are valid. And I think we need to talk together to try and put the puzzle pieces together and make more sense of meaning. And it is difficult to do that because life is not one thing. It is not simplistic, and it is not simply binary. It is complex. Humanism doesn't do the trick. Materialism doesn't do the trick. Idealism doesn't do the trick. Life is multifarious. It's multi-layered. And we need to allow ourselves to look and explore at all the different levels that we encounter. And of course, at every level, we are confronted with paradoxes, contradictions, and difficulties. So at every level, we have these opportunities to learn and find things out. So one of the things that is important to bear in mind is that as individuals, we are constructed by many different circles of organization of meaning around us. There are many different structures that we fit within, and those structures dictate meanings to us. And to liberate ourselves, or to come into our own, we have to accept those structures and the meanings that they give us, and we have to dare to engage with those meanings, question them, dilute them, alter them, and recreate them for ourselves. And some people get stuck with that at different levels. Some people get stuck at the individual level, others at the family level, with families that constrict their meanings right from the start. Others get into trouble because they don't feel held as an individual or by the family, or something cracks open in the family, and then suddenly we burst out of that same framework of meaning. So there are many different ways in which we start struggling with meaning making right from the start. But mainly, the meaning structures can also hold us safe if we learn to be fluid and confident with them. The individual, the family, government and politics, society and the state, culture and the ideology that is the background to everything we do and think and feel. And then nature, the earth, but not just the earth, the whole universe that holds us and that dictates limits and possibilities to our existence all the time. Now, as a psychotherapist, of course, I am celebrating my 45th anniversary. My first full-time job, I did 2 years before that, but my first full-time job in psychiatry, I took on in 1973. It shocks me when I think of it. The number of people I've listened to and the number of troubles I've heard about in my life is huge. And out of that, I have absolutely concluded that the more vigorously and with the more vitality we open ourselves to these difficulties, rather than being afraid of them and running away from them, the more we are able to thrive on those difficulties. And of course, for some people, that is really a very hard call. What they really need, first of all, is just that, to be safe somewhere and find the comfort again and the confidence again that they can do those explorations. And that is in first instance what we have to provide. Here is a reminder of the facts about psychotherapy. Very nice together by collaborators. So we know these are really the only things we absolutely know about who works in psychotherapy. Anything more about meaning and how to create. At least this gives an idea. We know that it is the therapeutic alliance and the relationship that is primarily important to what happens. The outcome studies, it's not the method, it is the person of the therapist that makes a difference. And the person of the therapist makes a difference by being capable of really showing genuine empathy, really connecting and creating agreed and consensual goals with the client, finding unconditional and warm acceptance of their client. Interestingly, some of Roger's conditions are very well represented. So he knew a thing or two about psychotherapy, as Roger's did. So sharing something of our own lives makes a difference. This whole thing is actually quite important. To set off that spark that make people realize that we're all human, we all struggle with life, and when we trust each other to make something of it, we can do. Giving ongoing feedback is important, and taking part responsibility when things don't go well, which indicates, again, that same thing, that this is a collaborative effort. We're doing this together. Together, we stand side by side to make sense of life and to find meaning in things that seem unsayable, unthinkable, and unovercome. We can do it. And the contradictions that this creates about the importance of meaning is that the whole business of psychotherapy tries to set itself down into a different direction. It is all about regulation.
If she is standing
and what we actually need is to emphasize the opposite, the art of psychotherapy, the human art of making meaning together. That is what will help people far, far more than creating more frameworks or scripted frameworks of how one should do therapy. We should throw that out sometimes and just learn to reconnect to other people and to life itself.
And you shake hands like she walks out, and you go, you help her, right? But she's just standing there, you just leave
But of course, that is me making decisions about what is meaningful in psychotherapy.
Right?
And there are many different ways of finding meaning in psychotherapy. Some people think it is about curing people, the medical world. It's about healing. And of course, sometimes that is exactly what it is about. All these things are true. Meaning stands together. What we've got to do is find a way of making a tapestry of all the different ways in which we can make meaning and be therapeutic. And then we can see. Some people think it's about coping, sports people. Some think it's about cognitive correction, that people's minds need to be set straight, learn to think again. It's also true, but it's only a small part of the whole picture. Some people think it's about understanding, others think it's about analysis and insight. Others think it's about autonomy, making people capable of, handling life on their own again. All true. Every single one of them are right. But they're all wrong when they're imposing one way of doing things, and they think that one model fits everybody. So the meaning model, I think, is by far the most comprehensive one, especially if it can accept that all these petals of different forms of psychotherapy are part of the flower of meaning making. Now there's another way of cutting that cake, of seeing how we make meaning in our profession, or how we make meaning as human beings in life altogether. So that is by looking at the issue of time. So it's possible to take a past focus in our work, and when we do that, I think of it as a restorational form of therapy. We primarily focus on what has gone wrong at some point in the past, and we seek to heal past pain and trauma. Or we can be more experiential, which is to focus on the present, the here and now, the feelings and actions that are happening in a person's life. Or we can focus the meanings on aspirational ones, finding future possibilities. Of course, that is also very important. Past, present, and future need each other. They cannot stand alone. It's no good to just do one of these. You need to help a person constantly weaving between past, present, future, and eternity, because that's the fourth dimension of time. Eternally, certain values, certain truth hold true for all of us. And to recognize those gives us a very big frame to that whole picture of our lives. And we often forget that people seek to find such values, such virtues, such truth to live by. That is also how they create meaning for themselves. So basically, our task is to help people disclose meanings, to open up all those different sources of meaning in our lives. And in order to do that, we need to be comfortable with it. We need to be able to have done that in our own lives and not be afraid, not hide from it, and not think that we're just doing positive meaning because that is far from the case. So meaning is about our connections to the world and understanding those connections, and also becoming more capable of selecting the meanings that are good for us and deselecting some of the meanings that are not so good for us. It's exactly what we do in the brain, making new synaptic connections between neurons, but also eliminating some redundant ones. That clearing up work of getting rid of stuff and daring to say no to some things and some relationships and yes to others is a very important part of how we create these tapestries of meaning in our lives. There are so many different meanings that it has been very important to me to create some systematic ways of doing that. And that's why I use what I call structural existential analysis, which uses models for understanding where you are in space, where you are in time, where you are in relation to emotions, and where you are in relation to time and paradox. So here are the spatial buckets. Meaning is about connections to our physical world, to nature and to the things in the world through our body. It is about the social world, which is our connections to other people through our ego. The personal world, which is our connection to ourselves and the way we create our personality and our inner world. And it is very importantly about the spiritual dimension. How we create ideas, retain ideas, make sense of things, make meaning in the world, retain values and beliefs. So, this is where we are. You know what this is? This is our galaxy. This is our galaxy, but we're not at the center of it, you know. Do you know where we are? Our solar system is here. I can't even show it you properly because it is so tiny. And please remember that this is one of millions of galaxies. So our solar system is here in a tiny pinprick of this galaxy, which is one of billions in the universe. We are really set in a very, very wide perspective. But we can also, of course, come to it the other way around and remember how important each of us is and how much our connections to other people and to the world and to life itself makes a difference to the world. But I always find it very refreshing to remind myself of that overall context, because we are never but an aspect, an element, a part of a wider context. And our relationships to all that is are crucial to our meaning making. If we try to cut ourselves off from all of that, the meaning disappears. The more we connect, the more meaning there is. Organizing all those connections is the task in many things. And we got to make distinctions between meaning and sense making. And right in the middle there is when we feel life is most meaningful, in that blue bit there. Because then the external sense making of things actually being how they are, fitting this reality, fitting this truth, fits with our internal organization and our internal sense that this feels right, this is meaningful, this is important. So that's how we do that. The Japanese have this interesting idea of ikigai, which can help you in seeing how a person can find this internal heart of that flower in order to locate what will matter to them in life, how they can live a meaningful life, which is the kind of core point where that which you love, that which the world needs, that which you can be paid for, and that which you are good at all together. And you know that you are actually using yourself and your personal energy in the best possible way. Then we can truly be open, give of ourselves, and take from the Lord, and make a small difference on this little planet. Meanings are confusing. Frege talked about it before many others. He said that names don't just refer to something, but they have a sense as well. So he gives the example of people discovering the morning star and calling it phosphorus. Phosphorus, the light giver. And then later on they discovered the evening star and they called it Hesperos, which means evening, shining. And then one fine day they realized that this was the same star, which is actually not a star, but a planet. And you know which planet that is. It's Venus, which appears in the morning between January and March, and in the evening between July and October. So you see, the meaning of what that star was about was complex, and it needed quite a bit of investigation for those separate meanings to come together and for people to realize how this was really together. And I think this is pretty much what we often do when we do psychotherapy. We cannot just analyze things and pull things apart. We also have to gather things in and bring things together that fit together, like putting this puzzle together. And for that, we need to use our memory, imagination, understanding, our dreams, and our creativity. As Winnicott said, we have to be open to playing with it. It's not just all about serious analysis. It's also about playing with it and gathering in elements that we can put together in different ways all the time. Now, for me, of course, as a philosopher, when I studied philosophy, it started always with the Athenian philosophers, who are also, as you know, the forerunners of Western science. And that's when it was. They started out by trying to ask questions about the meaning of life and how we should live our existence. But then they ended up saying, okay, what we really need to find out is what is the case in the world. And philosophy became more and more Cartesian, if you like, more and more about doing science. And then all the sciences split off from philosophy, one after the other. Physics, chemistry, biology, and also psychology, which used to be part of philosophy too. So I like to go back to these Athenian philosophers and see how they went about this quest for meaning. And my first and always my best philosopher is Socrates, not Plato, Socrates, who lived all that long time ago in Athens. And who said the unreflected life is not worth living. Why? Because it is reflecting on things that makes us human. It is our capacity to understand and make meaning that makes us be the best that we can possibly be. This was Plato's rendering of Socrates' idea that philosophy is about getting out of the cave. They thought that people spend a lot of their time sitting chained to a wall in a cave, looking on a wall where shadows appear of objects that these guys are carrying on the wall. A fire makes those shadows move around on the wall. And we sit chained to the wall, arguing with each other, saying, oh, it's like this, it's like that, oh, that belongs here, that belongs there. And Plato says, this is chimera. this is something that isn't real. What needs to happen is that we loosen our chains, we get out of the cave, we go up and discover the real world. And that's what he called the world of ideas, which is really the word of shapes. Ideas, you know, is gestalts, it's shapes. It is where we create meaning, or rather where we find meaning, because when we go out of the cave, we can observe things as they actually are. But of course, sometimes we also need to explore the cave, and we need to dare to go out of the light into the dark, and to find out how we can make meaning of things that are hidden and that are not out in the sunshine. Aristotle found meaning in a much more structured way. He is well known for saying that we should have a virtue ethics. We should figure out not how to live a hedonistic life, you know, a life of positives, but how to live a life of virtue. What that meant was figuring out how things fit together and then live in accordance with that. So he thought it should always be done in relation to a wider community, because we cannot figure out what's good just for ourselves. It's got to be good for everybody for it to really stand in the long term. So for him, it was all about virtues of orderliness, deliberateness, and clarity, and creating those values in our lives. You will find that around the same time, similar ideas were happening elsewhere in the world. And although Hinduism is much older, of course, Buddhism has very similar ideas to these Athenian philosophers' ideas as well. So we have the Epicureans, which I'll spare you because they kind of, you know, try to finesse this idea of hedonism and how to overcome that. But then we have the skeptics, and I want to say a word about that because it's such an interesting way to go about meaning. Because what the skeptics concluded was that the only way to live a decent life or a happy life was to stop yourself having pain and suffering. Now, I don't think that was a very good thing to do, but it was a necessary moment in history. So they thought, let's just get rid of believing in anything. Cynical and skeptical, so there were some cynics as well. So that's like giving up on meaning making altogether. The Stoics decided to be strong instead, and to face up to the negatives of life, but not actually to make sense of the negatives, but rather to create and affirm values like courage and temperance and wisdom in order to cope with it. Their objective, though, was apathy. It means not feeling. It was to be above feeling. And as you will see, I don't think that is the right way. The Hindu four goals of life, which go much further back, are quite interesting because, you know, I have this four-dimension model, and it fits very nicely with there. So Dharma is about right conduct, Artha is about dealing with wealth and physical material possessions. Karma is about managing your desires and how your past desires affect your present and your future. And Moksha is about liberation, which is very much about reconnecting to the overall patterns of being beyond human existence. So I find some incredible confluence with Hinduism from an existential perspective. Confucius is interesting too, because he had a very sort of Aristotelian view of the world, that we need to go about finding meaning in life in a very creative and artisanal manner, We have tools, we apply them, we live in the right sort of way. And Buddha, of course, brought this idea, same as Socrates and Plato, that our thoughts determine our connections to the world, and therefore we have to learn to work with those thoughts very carefully indeed. The thing that is so clear to me is that when you look at Athenian philosophers and those early world religions, they all, in my view, go down the same path, which is to minimize our emotions as much as possible. All of them see the emotions that we have, our feelings, as the enemy. We've got to find a way not to have these annoying feelings, or to have only mild feelings or positive feelings. Now, I think our challenge in this century is to learn that this we can do better than that. We can be strong enough to harvest not just the positives, but all those difficult emotions too. And to learn to acknowledge them and value them, and to not suppress those feelings and find ourselves oppressed like that by our feelings and lose our freedom, because that is what depression is. Feeling that, there is something sitting on your chest and you can't breathe anymore and life becomes impossible. Or what anxiety is, which is your energy just vibrates the hell out of you and you can't control it. We need to learn how each of those emotions actually is part of our connectivity to the world, and therefore essentially the pathway towards meaning. For me, it was the philosopher Spinoza who gave me the keys to how to do that. Because he wrote this wonderful book, The Ethics, in which he systematically looks at the challenges and possibilities of life and how our emotions correspond absolutely predictably to us either achieving the things we value or losing the things that we value. And so he said that if we look at things under a species of eternity, we can work out our own existence much better. Because actually the universe is governed in a lawful way. And once we understand that, we understand what is determined, and then we can also understand what isn't. And we know what the margin of freedom is that we can have in our life. Hegel, I think, added another important insight, which is that of dialectics. The understanding that things come in opposites. Everything comes in opposites in our lives. If you are happy, you will be sad. If you are high, you can be low. Everything is in tensions and paradoxes. And once you understand how to work with those, instead of trying to have only good things and not bad things, then you can see how those opposites help you move. Look, one thing and another. This is how we move forward. I balance from left to right. I don't go. It's much easier to take steps when you are confident. You can do, this and that, and you can also go backwards. All that movement is part of how we get our freedom. So to have our freedom, we need to be prepared to face the opposites, and then we gain the possibility of transcendence. And out of these ideas grew these philosophers of freedom in the 19th century who said, no more of this scientific philosophy. Let's get back to this original idea that philosophy is the search for meaning. How do we live a successful, happy, meaningful human existence? And they all have their contributions to make. I won't talk about any of them now, but I just wanted you to realize that there is a whole literature there in the 19th century. There's a hell of a lot of wisdom to take from if we want to move forward in this field. So we can still learn the facts of psychology as a Cartesian science. These guys have still contributed a lot of stuff. I'm not saying it's either or. They are important too. But Husserl, I think, showed the way. He said, we need a new way of doing science. He was a mathematician, and he said we need a new way of doing science. We need to go beyond the divide. We need science that brings in both the objective search for truth and the subjective understanding of how things mean something and how they fit together. So phenomenology is about bringing objectivity and subjectivity into one level. We don't have time to talk about how that is done, but it is basically about realizing that all knowledge starts from our human experience and goes back to our human experience. And that the closer we can stick to our own experience, to sift what matters and what doesn't matter, the more we are likely to find out how to create meaning and find truth. So I'll skip that. I did a bit about that in my workshop yesterday, but I won't go about that now. So the application of phenomenology to existential therapy is that we ask ontological questions. We ask questions about being in the world. How do you want to be? Who are you? Why are you here? Why have you responded to the difficulties in your life in the way you have? How would you like to be able to respond to them? How can we together find a greater understanding of what has happened to you and how that fits into the overall understanding of human existence? So we look at ontic problems, but we also ask these very fundamental questions, lots and lots of them. And these are by no means the only ones. So, the key to all of this, as Heidegger said, is that we try to find truth. Truth in Greek is aletheia, which means uncoveringness. So the Greek believed that when we cover things over, when we cover them up, when we go into denial, when we turn away from what is actually the case or what we actually feel, then we are in untruth. And to be in truth, all we have to do is unveil what is there, reveal what is there, elucidate what is there, throw light on what is there, and trust that we will find something. And the first thing we find is that actually all of us are homeless in a way. All of us are thrown into a world that is alien to us at first, and that we spend an enormous amount of time trying to find a place in. And all of you are doing that here today, in this new environment with each other. We're all going to feel a little bit homeless, and we're all seeking to make sense of that experience and gain some new meaning out of it. And the more we can do that in a friendly and mutually supportive way, the more meaning we will be creating. But actually, to have that experience of Unheimlichkeit, of homelessness, is the sine qua non of us beginning to realize just how important it is to make ourselves at home. If you haven't been without it, you cannot appreciate it. As always, you need to go down in order to be able to go up as well. So, in existential therapy, we talk with people in dialogue together. We don't think in terms of pathology. We think in terms of people's problems in living. We think in terms of people philosophically understanding their anxiety, their guilt, their despair, which all of us experience. Camus wrote about the myth of Sisyphus, where he said, life is like a futile uphill struggle, where like Sisyphus, we push this boulder up the mountain, and no sooner is it up there before it falls back down again. And it seems nonsensical. The moment you clean up your house and you think it's wonderful, you know that the next day it's going to be all dirty again. How does it happen? It's very weird. It's life, isn't it? The moment you think you're happy and you're on top of the world, something's going to go wrong. You know it. Because that's how life works. We go up, and then something happens, and we go down again. And the trick, in order to make meaning out of that, is not to stay on top of your mountain in isolation, because that is meaningless. That's just isolation. It's to immerse yourself in the world. Frankel put it that way, as I'm sure you all know. Taking from the world, giving to the world, and working on your attitude so that you can use suffering in a stronger, more courageous way. There we are. Plenty of other philosophers and therapists have done it in a very different way. Plenty to be taken from each of them. Existential practitioners, plenty of them too. There they are, some of them. And here is a list of all of them arranged by different forms of existential therapy, which will be in this Wily World Handbook. But it's not just about what these experts have done. It's about you and I connecting with the world and gaining perspective of our lives, seeing where we're located. It's about daring to ask the big questions rather than being perturbed by the small things all the time. It's daring to challenge ourselves about how we could be better in our relationship, better in relation to ourselves, more kind to ourselves, better in relation to our bodies, better in relation to the universe altogether. And that is really the aim of existential dialogue, is to get people back into that elasticity, that flexibility, that vitality of enjoying asking those questions, of feeling the challenge of the difficulties of life instead of fearing them. And we can only do that if we work not just towards happiness. It's useful to know what makes people happy, but it isn't just about positive things. It's about how to actually be able to find meaning and value in life. So there are much greater values than happiness: love, truth, beauty, loyalty, honor, courage, freedom, and many other things besides. And we need to find a way to absorb all of that, including our troubles, so that we can rise and see, the perspective on the world that helps us become resilient. We know that resilience comes to a large extent from making new connections and finding meaning in our experiences, and really dealing with that with humor, patience, tolerance, and a kind of optimism as well. You know about Tedeschi, how moods are on post-traumatic growth, where actually 90%, and I think it's always worth remembering this, 90% of survivors of major trauma actually think that they gained something from it, that they have renewed their appreciation of life, found greater meaning, whereas only 5 to 10% suffer post-traumatic stresses. So I like to think of it in the 4 worlds. At each of those levels, there are things we can do to create greater vitality, better functioning. We can make ourselves better in our bodies, with other people, in our inner world, and in the world of ideas as well. And we can only do that if we become familiar with our feelings. Our feelings show us the way. They are a compass. I call this the compass of emotions. They tell us where we are in relation to the things we value that make us feel high, and where we are in relation to the things that don't make us feel happy. And to learn to appreciate each of these emotions, rather than wanting only certain emotions, is an incredible liberation. Just note that all these emotions that make us go up towards what we value create a certain amount of anxiety, because when you want something, you need to climb up that hill, and for that we need energy, and that's basically what anxiety is. It is ourselves getting ready for the struggle to go up a new hill, to acquire something that will make us happy. Anxiety is the move towards happiness, and depression is the descent towards loss. And both the ascent towards what is of value and the descent towards the letting go are equally important. When you get up in the morning, you get ready to be anxious and do your job. And when you go to bed, you gotta let go. You gotta let go. Otherwise you cannot sleep. It's very simple. It's what insomnia is about. People trying to stay on top, in control, worrying, managing. You gotta let go. You're gonna do stuff. It's gonna be okay, mate. It's fine. Let it go. You'll learn. You'll become a deeper, more whole, more connected, more meaningful, kinder human being. It's been well shown. Our adversity deepens us and helps us. That's it. It is like a whole spectrum of colors, and you can't just choose one color out of that. Life is much more interesting when you are at ease with the whole range, and that is when you feel you can tune in. Now, I know I need to finish, so I'll just click quickly through some of the slides and say a few things about the ones remaining. So this is the take-home message. We grow when we face challenges, and actually allow them to touch us rather than hardening ourselves. I like this one. When you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but actually you've been planted. And a whole new growth will happen out of that if you allow that process. It takes time. Trust, it takes time. Potentiality, this is a Heideggerian thing, is always greater than actuality. What is now is always less than what is possible for tomorrow. And that is our task. It is to make more connections, get bigger understanding of what is happening in our world, and make something of it. Getting to know ourselves in the past, in the present, in the future, in relation to the world of others, of self, of eternity. We have a lot of things that we need to do, and we do it best in dialogue with each other. When we keep it to ourselves, we diminish ourselves. The more we are in dialogue, and the more generous we can be with one another, the more we will gain and learn from it. I was going to tell you about the dialectic of time, but I have no time for that. Just remember that meaning is created by the connections you create. When things fit together, kids love that, puzzles, when things fit together, it feels right. Yes, this is how it fits together. That's meaningful. And of course, with Bob in mind and his idea of plotting things, creating brains, we can weave even more than 3 strands the more connections we create and the stronger it is. And I think this is the message where I will have to leave you. The more patterns we create and recognize, the more we see our belonging and our affiliation, the more meaningful our life will be, and the more networked we will be for when those losses happen. The more connections and the more meaningful patterns connect our lives, the more resilient we become to face our adversity. Thank you very much.